Welcome to the Innovation World Young Collaborator podcast series. Hello, everyone. Sid here, and I am excited to host today's podcast where we interview Jessie Jiang. She is the founder and CEO of Create and Learn, an online learning platform that presents STEM classes to youth in a creative and fun-filled fashion. Jessie was previously product director at Google and earned her MBA at Stanford and her Ph.D. in computer science from UCLA. I am also personally connected with Create and Learn. When I was 7, I really wanted to learn coding, so I joined the Create and Learn coding courses, where I was met with fun, simplistic coding, where I actually understood the real-world applications, which helped me build a strong foundation, which helps me even today while coding. I was really awestruck by the work that Create and Learn has done and has really wanted to interview Jessie ever since then. Today's episode is The Code Whisperer, Jessie Jiang. Please, before we begin, tell me more about yourself.
All right. Well, thanks for the introduction. I'm excited to be here. It's been quite a few years since we got to know each other, so I'm excited to be here and talking to you about these broader topic. I think you gave me a nice intro already. I was at Google before started Create and Learn. I was a product director in Google Cloud. We've been working on Create and Learn for quite a few years, and it's been an exciting journey.
Well, let's start at the beginning of. Thank you for your answer. Let's start at the beginning of this podcast and the beginning of your journey. Could you please tell the audience more about why you created Create and Learn?
Yeah. It's a long story. Actually, I started teaching my daughter coding when she was in second grade. And believe it or not, she's actually a high school senior. So you're seventh grade. I'm like, oh my gosh, time flies. So I taught her and her friends at our house coding, and then I volunteered to teach her class in school. And then when she grew a little older, I started looking for programs to do for her after school for camps. But I wasn't very happy about with what I find. I think there was a general quality issue, but more importantly, I feel like at that time, the program was not teaching what I feel was really leading to usefulness in the real world. So that's actually one of the main drivers of why we started Create and Learn. And on day one, we did several things that very, very differently. One is definitely trying to teach students what's really kind of the new and relevant in the real world. So we started teaching AI and data science almost on day one of our program. And I know like AI is a like sort of a very top popular topic these days, but 7 or 8 years ago, we were probably one of the very first program, if not the first program. I actually started teaching kids like fourth grade AI at that time. And then we also try to build pathways so students not just like learn Scratch and Python, but actually eventually leads to, oh, this is really kind of leads to game development in the real world. This leads to cloud applications in the real world, and this leads to AI and data science in the real world. So build pathways. We do project-based learning, and I think you mentioned, like, thanks for saying that you enjoy the classes that you had with us. Definitely, we want to make sure that students are not sitting there, sitting to lectures, but they're actually building project on a constant basis. Last but not the least, I don't know if you know it or not, but I live in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and even I was having so much trouble finding a program I was happy about. So I figured it must be like many parents probably have the same challenge. So we started as an online program on day one. And at that time, I don't remember if anyone else was doing it, but I definitely remember that we were teaching people how to use Zoom because nobody had heard of Zoom. So it was a lot of fun, but that also allowed me to meet students all over the world, including yourself. So definitely it's a great decision and allow us to reach a lot more students. So here we are. We've been around for about 7 or 8 years.
Wow, that was an amazing origin story to creating Create and Learn. But it also shows that, if I'm correct, you prioritize building a foundational, like you prioritize on building foundation and giving the pathways to students rather than like telling them how they can just copy off of existing product projects, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's as several aspects of it in terms of our overall curriculum structure. We want students to start by, for instance, learning Scratch coding, and then if they're interested in robotics, they can learn robotics class, and they can learn about Arduino, then they can learn about C++. So these pathways from like Scratch is obviously very different from what's used in industry to something like C++ would be, I think it's the most popular programming language in robotics. So that pathway we help students build by as they grow over the time and over years. But then, yes, in the individual classes, as you mentioned, we don't want a student just kind of copy and paste, and we want them to understand what they're building and actually put their creativity as they build their project in classes.
Was there any part of your upbringing that has taught you lessons which has guided your journey?
Um, There are many aspects. I would say when I was super young, my parents are, worked very hard and they're both engineers. I definitely felt like I learned a lot of work ethics aspect of things from them. And my mom was an engineer as well. There were not many female engineers at that time, so that was super special. I would say that when I went to my PhD program, I don't know if you did that part of research, my professor is actually Dr. Len Clanrock from UCLA. He was one of the pioneers on the internet, like starting the internet. And I actually felt like I learned a lot from him in terms of how you be a really good technical person, but also someone who make like big impact to other people as well. So I think that's actually one aspect. And there's a lot of things I learned in my job at Google and various other places, and definitely kind of comes handy on a daily basis as I'm doing things today.
Yeah, like so. So now, Jesse, my next question. Create and Learn relies on live small group instructors. In an era of AI tutors and self-paced applications, why do you believe human instructors remain critical for K-12 STEM education?
Mm. That's a really good question. And I think a lot of people, including ourselves, are actually looking into how AI can improve learning experiences. We actually have launched a number of things, but mostly about things like workbooks and, on Scratch and Python and various other things where students can learn on their own after class as practices. Um, at the current stage of the AI, it's definitely not nearly as good as a real teacher yet. Maybe at some point it will get there. But my personal belief at this point is human connection in learning is extremely important. And the reason I said that is in the early days of Create and Learn, I actually taught a lot of classes myself and, just kind of work with the student directly. In many, many cases, I just felt like it was very clear that for the student, it's probably been a long time since an adult has been there, sitting there and listened to them with 100% attention on what they have in mind, what they think, what their ideas are. And most of the time, if you know when you're coming, I mean, I have to say I'm guilty of this as well when I'm sitting with my kids, and it's rarely I spend an hour listening to what she is thinking about in her head. But I just feel like that listening is it was just like to the extent that the learning part is important, but even just that listening and attention from a human, it was so important to the student in terms of them building a confidence, growing their passion. And I felt like that would never go away, regardless how, sort of how advanced the AI going to be. And I hope that I personally actually feel like that human attention, especially in learning, is probably going to be one of the last things that make humanity special. I know it sounds like very fluffy, but I truly believe that human connection is going to be probably one of the most important things I hope we keep as a human race. So,
So,
yeah.
sort of follow up on that question. Do you believe later on, well, most children will be guided by an AI self-paced instructor? Do you believe that Create and Learn being one of the few organizations that actually has human instructors will stand as like a kind of contrast and be like really helpful for the students to come there?
I hope not. I actually hope that I know it's difficult, it's challenging. I actually think or hope that more people will become teachers in the future. I know people talk about jobs and all that, what would be the meaningful job? I actually hope more people will become teachers and then bring up kids and giving them a human touch in their education becomes even more important. Um, I just part of the, kind of a growing up process. I hope that's where the world is going to be. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if, like a lot of learnings are done with AI as well, because yes, it's going to be not quite possible for us to give like one-on-one teaching for student all the time, but AI can provide those personalized learning that, like human, which is not going to be that many teachers to do one-on-one all the time. So I think AI can provide that personalized learning and fill the gap, but I sure hope that there will be more teachers and we're not the only one. And I hope that AI will play a big role, but never really replace the real teachers because as you mentioned earlier as well, that personal connections are just so important as part of the growing up for human in general.
Yeah, the personal connections, they like transcend the efficiency that like drives the businesses today. They're just something like inexplainable by like just like thinking rationally, but deeper down as humans, we all think like that.
Yeah.
So speaking of the future and AI, how do you think the usefulness of computer skills in the job market has evolved over time? And where do you see that going in the future?
That's a really good question and definitely have a lot of like conversations going on as well. And I got asked by parents all the time these days, like, should my kids really learn coding or not? There are definitely different opinions on this. Some people feel like it's not going to be as useful because AI is getting really good at it, especially with coding. I'm definitely in the group of, with a lot of other people, feel like coding skills is going to become more important than ever, and actually, more people will need to code. Now, the caveat or the thing to call out is this coding is very different from, likely very different from the coding that has been done in the last 20, 30, like 40, 50 years. There's not going to be a whole lot of, hey, I might worry about the commas or parentheses and all that in syntax in Python or C++ plus plus or Java. A lot of it is going to be about how do I build the whole system level things. Let's say if you want to build an application, you only not only need to know the syntax of Python, you need to know how to use database, you need to know how to do networking, you need to know how to design to make the user interface really great. You need to make sure your system is secure. So a lot of the coding learning would actually be focused much more on the system level. And then a lot of the details jobs would be done in partnership with AI. And you might have heard that I think the Stanford, I read news somewhere like Stanford, at Stanford University, the most popular class in the computer science department this year actually involves no coding, which is like essentially what they call the vibe coding. You use prompt to quote unquote code, but still need to understand a lot of the architecture and then system levels of things. Um, so that's actually in terms of, what coding means is going to be very different from what today's are, but it's going to be at much more broader system level, architectural level. Another aspect of things to call out it is really being integrated with many other disciplines. I don't know what other things you like in school, but we recently did analysis of the top 40 there's a competition for high school senior research called Regeneron Science Talent Search. And literally, these are the very top research done by high school students in the United States. And they had their finalist competition, I think, 2 weeks ago for the top 40 students. So we did analysis of the project done by that 40 student. And they're in all sort of different areas like physics, space science, and biology, and medicine, environmental science, even art and math and all that. More than half, like about half of them actually use coding in a very significant way in order to deliver their research. So what this says is like, I mean, maybe one or two of them are pure computer science, but vast majority of them are these like interdisciplinary areas. So what this means is in terms of usefulness of the computer skill, yes, it's very useful. Yes, and it's become very integrated into other areas. So like these days, whenever, when I talk to a student about coding and all that, and I always tell them, it's great that you're learning computer science. And I think you definitely need to learn computer science, but you should learn something else as well. And computer science plus something, and that something can be physics, material science, robotics, healthcare, and whatever. The computer science plus something is the future. It's not just the computer science, and you can certainly not do just that something else without computer science. So that's another aspect of, if we're talking about future of computer science, is about combining it with another disciplinary, and that kind of broaden the impact of computer science as well.
Do you think AI, with its knowledge of prior human solutions, can solve for existing problems that have not been solved by humans yet because the AI only has the history of what the humans have done? Like, do you believe that AI can solve these problems?
That's a really, really good question. I personally think it could. And I personally actually think it might have already. I actually had this conversation. I wouldn't say it, there's a very large space of things that it probably couldn't solve for sure at this point still. Um, but I actually was talking to someone about this a while back, and it said a lot of times AI may be able to solve it, and we're not believing AI. AI hallucinate. So let's leave that aside. It definitely make mistakes all the time. And there was an examples of I can't remember the specific details, but definitely a university research where AI gave the people some suggestions on how to do certain things, and it has something to do with material science. And they just initially just kind of put it aside and say, oh, it's not possible. It doesn't make sense because of X, Y, Z. And then later on, they actually decide to try what AI suggested, and it turns out what AI suggested was true. So the interesting thing is, definitely AI probably making a mistake, hallucinate a lot of times, but AI are probably giving us a lot of ideas that uh, we do not realize based on our own current knowledge. And then there is plenty of innovations that AI can help us do, even just based on the innovations, the like already in there, there's probably numerous things that it can help us, even though it's based on knowledge that we know already. I felt like your question is also partially my man, and I read about or heard about this people saying, well, can AI ever invent like relativity theory like Einstein did? Because that seemed to be just a jump, such a jump that is not necessarily connected to known knowledge. I'm not so sure people know at this point, but we definitely feel like there's definitely a feeling that AI is probably telling us a lot of things that we're not necessarily believing it because it's beyond the scope of our understanding also. So yeah, so I think that, sum up is I feel like even just based on the known knowledge, AI can help us do a lot of innovations it probably can leapfrog at this point as well, but I'm not so sure like humans are always ready, be there and accepting the leapfrogs that AI, kind of has come up. I definitely feel like AI, in many cases are better than human in terms of connecting dots because we have some people, a lot of people have very, very large capacity in their brain, but we can't really connect all the dots in our head. And AI sometimes able to connect different set of dots. That actually says that AI and humans are really partners because we're good at, probably connecting certain type of dots, and AI is good at connecting certain other type of dots. So if we work together, we're probably becoming much more creative and discover a lot of new things.
Wow, that that's a really good explanation on how AI and humans have to work together, which
Yeah.
really leads to my next question, quite coincidentally. As AI becomes everywhere, how do we teach kids to be critical consumers, not just users?
Hmm. I mean, I'm sure you know as well, there's a number of big initiatives in terms of trying to train teachers to understand AI, and hopefully, once teachers know it, they'll be able to teach everyone in school. I definitely think that's very, very important. But it's a slow changing process. We do a lot of that in our classes, and I'm just maybe give you a couple example that one of the things we do is when we teach student computer vision, what we do is we have student upload an image into a uh, leading AI system, and the system will come back to say, "Hey, I see tiger, I see mountains, I see rocks, and I see water." But not only it says that, it actually says, "I see tigers 98%. I see grass 95%. I see a rock 85%." These percentage actually shows the confident level, meaning how confident AI think there is something, like there is a tiger there or there are water there and there is like things like that. And I think even just from that small exercise, we immediately help students understand, oh, AI is not like 100%, like whatever AI does is not 100%. AI knows even on itself that it knows about these things about probabilities. So we shouldn't be thinking that we trust AI 100% as well. So always keep that critical thinking in mind as you mentioned. Another examples we do is we will have student talk to, for instance, a large language model, but you play different roles. Sometimes these roles are controversial, and then you're going to see that AI controversial in the sense that like one may be the opposite of the other. So one might say like, I really like X. X is best. And then they change their role to say, I really dislike X. X is the worst in the world. And then you try to have that conversation with AI, and you start to realize AI somehow is always encouraging you regarding what your idea you had and trying to please you. And then you realize, oh my gosh, that just is how it trained its personality. So when you are starting to talk to AI about other things, I think students become much more critical in the sense that, oh yes, it agree with me again, but it's not necessarily means that my idea, what I'm thinking is 100% correct. It just like that's how it's trained. But we have students do these kind of like opposite role conversations with AI to have them realize, yeah, regardless of what you tell it, it's going to answer it in certain ways because it's trying to be helpful. But so when you are talking to AI on other topics where you may not know the opposite side or the different opinions, you need to keep in mind that the fact that AI is agreeing with us does not mean that we're 100% correct. It just means that AI is playing its role again. So that's just like another examples of how we teach students to be critical when they working with the AI system. But I definitely feel like that's a very, very important things that hopefully a lot of the schools would be teachers getting trained as well, and they can teach students as well. And I'm sure a lot of times the parents can play a very important role. So
That like having AI under having the understanding that AI isn't very like unbiased. It is still to the whim of its creator for commercial uses. Like that understanding really makes you just like take a step back and like think about how you should not influence your decisions based off of what AI says. Like, where do you see the landscape of K to 12 computer science education in the next 5 years? And how is Create and Learn positioning itself to lead that change?
yeah, that's a really big question. I felt like as we discussed earlier that AI literacy is a, pretty major initiative, right, at this point. Um, I think it's definitely very important. And it's challenging to do, but I personally actually feel like that might be the easiest change to make. Um, at least I personally feel like the CS education and probably to some extent, um, all the subject need to change in terms of how we teach them, how we have kids learn because of AI. I mentioned earlier about the Stanford class. But even for like coding, for instance, and we probably should put in much less effort on, memorizing or always getting the syntax correct and stuff like that, because AI can just do that, very, very quickly and very easy when it's working with us. And we should focus much more on building applications, bringing things like not just the foundations of coding language, but database and network and security and all those things together to build applications. And that can be done with AI, even with younger kids. Um, so level changes like it's a complete change for computer science education. I actually think similar changes are needed in most of the other subjects as well. But that change is much, much harder to come by because you have to retrain all the teachers, you have to change all the curriculums, you have to change all the assessment. Like what does testing mean, right? So these involves a lot of system level changes in education. It's hard. I think it's going to take far more than 5 years to make fundamental changes. And I think that what I'm hoping we can do is, I mean, we're obviously adopting these changes almost in real time. As a online nimble program, we can do these very, very quickly. What I'm really hoping that as we make these changes ourselves, we can learn a lot of things and we can share our best practices with other people. So hopefully it can help others that wanting to make other like the same type of changes to do it faster as well. So that's what we hope to do. But you know, this is a you're asking a very, very big question. I think it's very challenging. And I definitely hope that, with what we do, we can help other people, like, do it faster in the process. We'll definitely do our part.
Create and Learn is gonna, it's gone places, but it's gonna give go even more places.
Our mo motto, I don't know if you know, is learning at the pace of innovation. And we decided to do that because at the very beginning, the very first question you said why we started Create and Learn, because I was like, I don't feel like the computer science program typically is teaching what's really in the real world at the forefront of what's happening. And I think that's, given how fast things are evolving, I definitely think that helping students to learn at the pace of innovation is going to become increasingly important. So that's what we will be keep doing for sure.
I'm sure of that too. Now, all good times must come to an end, and so we have to do with the ending of our podcast. I know our listening audience has really enjoyed learning about your work. Learn more about this program and others by visiting innovationworld.org. Thank you for joining the Innovation World Young Collaborator podcast series. This is Sid signing off until next time. Thank you.
Thank you.